Hello everyone, it's Johnny 𝐻𝐢𝐬𝐻𝐿, and today I'll be listening to Tango 0 Hour, or Nuevo Tango Hora Zero, by Astor Piazzolla and the New Tango Quintet. Piazzolla was an Argentine composer who I've recently learned is famous for making progressive and innovative music in the tradition of Argentina's tango style. He apparently used elements of jazz and Western classical music in his compositions, which in concept reminds me of what a lot of the progressive rock bands I love were doing with rock music in the early 70s. I was told in my comments that tango music, and in particular Piazzolla's brand of Nuevo Tango, were significant influences on the prog rock of Argentina. I've recently been listening to several albums by Luis Alberto Spinetta and Charly García, so check out those videos to keep up with my journey through the progressive music of Argentina. And I decided that at this point it might be a good idea to hear some of this music that was so important to that scene. Grasa de las Capitales by Serú Girán in particular, which I just listened to recently, had a really strong dark jazz influence that I really particularly liked. So I'll be quite interested to see how much of that kind of sound might show up in this music of Astor Piazzolla. This particular album, Tango 0 Hour, came out in 1986, which is sometime after the prog rock classics I've been enjoying recently and also quite late in Piazzolla's career. But it seems to be one of his most loved albums, and the man himself claimed it to be his greatest album he ever made, so it seems to be a really good place to start. If you enjoyed the video, do me a favor and click the like button, and share the video with anyone you know that loves Piazzolla and all this great music from Argentina. So let's get into the album. The first track is called Tanguedia III. Whoa, okay, so that was quite a bit darker than even I was expecting, and I was expecting something kind of dark, like I said, after what I'd heard on the Serú Girán stuff. But this wasn't just nocturnal, this was downright diabolical. In some ways it was reminding me of some of the dark prog I've heard, like rock in opposition bands like Henry Cow and Unedited, or even something like Magma with how intense it's coming across. And all this with no percussion, no drums. Yeah, very interesting. Let's move on to track 2. It's called Milonga del Ángel. Absolutely beautiful. So the first song was compelling as hell, pun intended. But this song was much more what I was hoping for and expecting to an extent, that nocturnal dark jazz sound. But in this case with a really heavy dose of romance as well, which I suppose is the traditional tango feel coming in, especially with some of the rhythms earlier on. Really strongly emotional stuff though. I loved the sliding bass, and it's really interesting how the bass is like the main instrument carrying the rhythm of the song. I'm not always a fan of solo violin. Sometimes it can strike me as cliche, but it felt very tasteful here and played with sincerity, which is important to me. So yeah, like I said, gorgeous, beautiful. So let's move on to track 3. It's called Concierto para Quinteto. Intense stuff. Again, we had some rather diabolical sounds, especially towards the beginning. You had these shrill notes on the violin and these like sliding notes all descending down. It gave me this feeling of like descent into hell kind of feeling. I think there was some cello in there as well, but I'm not sure. I didn't see anyone listed as a cello player on this. Just sounds so richly dark. Maybe it's just low notes on the violin though. And I read that Piazzolla himself plays an instrument called bandoneon, which seems quite similar to an accordion. He's really able to sing through that instrument. He really squeezes a lot of emotion out of it. That song went through all these different movements of different moods and feelings, but often with a lot of melancholy and desperation is the feeling I get from this music. Just full of intensity, and I love that. It was a really nice bit of clean lead guitar playing towards the end there, which is I think the first time we've heard that, and that was very impressive playing and sounded great. Okay, so let's move on to track 4. It's called Milonga Loca. All right, that was a pretty strange tune. Very rhythmic with lots of staccato playing and polyrhythms. Sometimes the violin would soar over the top, changing the feeling completely. And then it returns to the extremely rhythmic atonal stuff. I mean, there's lots of chromatic notes going in there. Not very melodic at those points, but it just increases the intensity. I mean, it reminds me of something like King Crimson would do in the 70s and 80s. Mental. No wonder the title is The Crazy Milonga. Let's move on to track 5. It's called Michelangelo 70. Okay, just a short one, that one. But it was another really intense tune with a quick tempo. And this one had a pretty memorable repeating riff throughout, which I liked quite a bit. But yeah, that just leaves us with the last 2 tracks, both of which are 10-minute behemoths. So no more of those tasty little numbers. We're getting into some serious length now. The next song is track 6, and it's called Contrabajísimo. Okay, that was a huge one with so much momentum. I have to say that surely was a cello in there at the start and towards the end. I'm near certain the violin can't play that low. It sounded great regardless, and so did the bass. There were some really cool jazzy bass parts throughout this song, especially towards the beginning. I was loving all the slides and bends. There were some rhythms in this song that were easily identifiable as tango. You could even dance to a lot of this one, I would say. But it was all alongside a lot of jazzy excursions. There was so much movement in this song. But it occurred to me that some of the more riff-based stuff on the last song and this one may actually be rock influenced in how it really like sits into a groove. But yeah, I think the real strength of this song was its mood transitions. It would go from soaring beauty to just madness at the drop of a hat. And I just love that. So let's move on to the last song, track 7. It's called Mumuki. Lovely. So we had some beautiful melodies towards the end there to end off the album. And honestly, that was one of the most pretty songs on the whole album that they chose to end it off with. I'm so glad they returned to some of that romantic nocturnal jazz that I loved earlier in the album during this last song. But not only that, at the start we had a solo from the guitar, a solo from the piano before the whole band came in. And the tunes that the guitar was playing especially were just full of longing emotion, which I just loved. Piano sounded great as well. And once the band came in, you know, they went into that nocturnal sound that I loved, but still managed to get a bit of the intensity going by the end. It was a really great track to round out the album with. It kind of had almost a bit of everything that he's had in the album so far. So yeah, wow, that album was really something. I was really especially taken with the balance of the influences that Piazzolla seemed to be incorporating into this music. I guess I was expecting something more thoroughly based in tango, something more dancey, I suppose, but maybe with a bit of jazz, a bit of classical stuff thrown in. But it really wasn't like that. It was much more of a balance between all the different styles, including, I think, some rock influence, along with these more complicated classical influenced harmonies, plus the jazz configuration of the band. And it ended up reminding me of what I've seen called third stream, which is stuff like what I know Charles Mingus doing, where he mixes classical music with jazz. It was much more in line with that than any of the dance tango that I've heard before. And I'm such a huge fan of Mingus. You know, the Black Saint and the Sinner Lady is one of my favorite albums. And I definitely will be putting this album in my mind in the same category as that one for just its lush musicality, just how it pierces through straight to your heart with its longing desperation in the emotion of the music. I really loved it for that. There was just so much atmosphere in this album as well. I think next time I hear this album, I'll want to listen to it at night, because that really seems to be where the music is living, in the nighttime. Just brilliant. I'll definitely like to hear more Piazzolla, so let me know what I should listen to next. I suppose I should probably hear some early stuff that might have had more of an impact directly on the other Argentinian music I've been listening to. Stuff that was being made at the same time in the late 60s, early 70s, earlier stuff of Piazzolla. So let me know what you'd like me to check out. If you've enjoyed this video, you can support me using the link in the description to buy me a coffee. I'll appreciate it because it really helps me to be able to keep making these videos, keep the channel going. And thank you very much for watching. Until next time, take it easy.